All right, welcome to School Facilities and Operations. I'm Burke Jones, and I'm the host and creator of this podcast. And really, as I've been looking back over the last 11 episodes, I have gotten so much out of talking to everybody that I've had on here. Um, and I hope all of the listeners feel the same way. I feel like it's kind of like a mini MBA that we're experiencing as a group as we go through this. And so, basically, I have two different kinds of episodes. I talk about this every time, but I have one type of episode where I bring on another person in a role similar to mine at a K-12 school. And we just have a conversation about what's going on in their lives, what's getting them excited to come to work every morning, and just end up getting a lot of new ideas and good sharing that comes out of those episodes. And then the other type is normally I bring on like a trade partner, say it's a roofer or a pavement guy, and we really deep dive into what's the information that we need to know as facilities directors to get at that to do those types of projects from where we sit. Along those lines, today I have Ginger Locke. She is the associate professor of EMS professions at Austin Community College. And I know you guys might be wondering, well, an associate professor of EMS professions like paramedics and stuff. So I thought I better do a little bit more. So first of all, Jennifer or Ginger, thank you for joining us today.
It's great to be here. I'm excited to talk about what we're going to talk about. I try to talk about it regularly just to keep up my own fluency. So thanks for letting me.
Well, fantastic. So I have a little bit of I'm a little starstruck today because Ginger has a podcast that I've listened to for several years called Medic Mindset. And I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but you guys are probably like, why would you listen to one about medics? Well, my son's a paramedic, and he told me about Ginger's podcast several years ago. And so I started listening because it gives me something to talk about with him. Half the episodes I can only understand about, a third of the medical stuff, but it's a fascinating insight into not only treatment, but also just kind of the mind of medics and their lives that they lead. And so when I see a new episode drop from Ginger, I'm always listening to it because she's a fantastic educator and a great podcast host. But she did an episode on feedback. And I was instantly attracted to it because I think that in our departments as operations and facilities, it's one thing that we really struggle with. So, Ginger, maybe give us a little bit of background on you, what you do day to day, and then maybe something fun about yourself that we don't, that we can't read about on LinkedIn.
All right, sure. So I'm on the faculty at Austin Community College's EMS profession. So I teach adult learners who basically have decided they want to become paramedics, and we get 2 years with them. So I kind of get that opportunity to have that relationship over a long period of time. So I think that translates to the workplace because as you think about people that you work with, these are long-term relationships, right? These aren't just like you see them for a day and it's over. Um, I started the podcast about 7 years ago, and feedback came up maybe 2 or 3 years ago because I attended a course and heard someone else talking about it. And I really was hearing things that I was doing wrong. And I had been teaching for about 10 years at that point. And, I think we teach how we were taught, we parent how we were parented. We don't really get like formal instruction on how to do a lot of these things. And I think it's a really nuanced conversation between two adults, particularly. I think we know how to like teach younger kids, maybe, but when two adults are giving each other feedback, it's a conversation that most people shy away from because they just haven't seen it modeled well or have never really dug into some of the I don't want to call it science, but some of the things that are well known, of how to navigate those conversations.
So your whole career has been paramedic, EMS training focused. So are you
Yeah.
finding there's like a big, I guess, lack of feedback in the profession, or kind of across the board in the research you've done that people just aren't skilled in it or even know what to do?
Yeah, I think there's a lack of feedback uh, in all of healthcare unless you're, actively a student. And that peer-to-peer feedback, or even like supervisor to person they're supervising, it could be minimal. In the workplace, in college, tons of feedback, and our students love that. And that's one of the transitions that they have to um, adapt to, is that they get feedback here when they're at the college with us every single day, right? I mean, we're just constantly building together. And then when they go work out in the field, they're kind of like, am I doing okay? Like, is anyone, how am I doing? They want to, it's very reassuring to know, how am I doing, or what do I need to do better? And they miss that. They tell me that they miss that. And there was a study that a woman named Dr. Remley Crow did, and she was looking just at burnout in EMS. And so she found many factors that led to burnout. But one of the things that came up that was kind of unexpected is that the um, the clinicians or the paramedics who got more feedback more regularly had lower burnout. So there is a correlation there. And just looking at raw numbers, they surveyed 15,000 EMS workers. So it was a big study, and half of them had received zero feedback on anything. So not just medical care, but just, operational things as well. So for, in the 30 days prior of when they were surveyed, they had received zero kind of constructive or um, appreciation or any type of feedback. And so
Right.
her kind of thesis, or my thesis, has been that if we can, I think the obstacle to them getting that is that these are difficult conversations that people shy away from.
I think you're right. I mean, I bet if you surveyed our people, whether
Hmm.
it's our custodians, our maintenance guys, our cooks, our transportation, bus drivers, bus aides, I bet the numbers would be lower than that.
Hmm.
Or if they received feedback, it was negative only.
Hmm. Right.
Um, so I don't think it's much different in any type of work environment, quite honestly.
I think you're probably right.
Because I think in my mind, when I think feedback, I I mean, we have the formal evaluations we
Hmm.
do once a year. And then the other type of feedback that, at least at my role, that I typically become involved in is difficult conversations, like somebody's in trouble or we're investigating a situation that happened, um, that are not positive feedback. Like people don't typically learn from those, they don't learn much from that, or it's a mandated education type of
Hmm.
conversation. Um,
I think
so
to
yeah,
give, I think to give I call it appreciation or positive feedback, or to tell someone, even if it's something really minute, like you're doing this procedure well, keep doing it that way. Um, that's so rare that anyone would say that, because our brains just see, oh, they're doing it right, moving on. Like there's nothing I need to address. But telling people very specific feedback about what they're doing correctly just encourages them to continue doing it, and they may not even know um, that they're doing it well. And
right.
so to give that type of positive feedback, it takes just a lot of intentionality. So I do it with my students, where I'm like, today I want to like purposefully build that relationship, build that emotional bank with the students, because maybe I know I'm going to have to give negative feedback at some point, right? I know it's coming.
Right.
And so just intentionally, when I catch them doing something well, tell them. And they're always like, sometimes they'll look at me and they're like, but what? Right? They've just not had a lot of that in their life, where people just tell them, you did that well, like this step, and then you did this step, and that's correct. And then that's the end of it. They're kind of like, and what comes next? Because
Yeah.
they're so used to a very common model of feedback, which is recognized by adults, and it's like this script where you say something good, then you say something negative, and then you say something good. Some people call that the critique sandwich. I think it has good intentions, but most adults recognize that you're just basically placating them. It's
Right.
disingenuous. And
Right.
the feedback that needed to be given was that stuff in the middle, the crap in the middle, right? So, um, what I've encouraged people to do, and what I try to do myself, is instead of that good thing, bad thing, good thing, and packing it all into one conversation, do it over the course of the relationship. You can preload some of these good things. And so when the negative thing or the constructive thing comes up, just say what you mean, right? Be genuine about the feedback you need to give, and the relationship can tolerate that because you've done all this pre-work of
Yeah.
preloading it.
Well, going back to the burnout real quick,
Mhm.
because there's not just burnout in healthcare. I mean, there's burnout with our custodians, there's burnout with the kitchen staff, um, and I think it's really interesting when we're trying to hold on to these employees because there's not a pool out there. I mean, we're experiencing the same thing you're experiencing in EMS is the pool of people that want to do the job is much smaller even than it was 3 years ago.
Mm.
And so we want to hold on to our people, but I see our custodians getting burned out because
Mhm.
if they get feedback, it's negative, like my classroom's dirty again, or
Mhm.
come clean up the vomit, or
Mhm.
it's kind of the negative um, messages they get from people. Not that
Right.
they intend it that way, but I think it's just when you hear that over and over,
Mhm.
you begin to feel like, gosh, I'm not doing a good job, and I'm burned out. I'm tired of the complaining, and
Right.
we lose people. I mean, I know
Mhm.
we lose people, and I want to see what we can do to stop that, which is why I want to have this conversation today. Um, I
I
think
think
you
when
look at
people come to
this.
their job, obviously they need a paycheck. And then another thing they can get out of it, or something that probably sustains them or keeps them happy in their work, is feeling a sense of meaning, right? That
Yes,
when they go to work, they have a meaning in the greater collective, right? So it's like when I do this work, it helps others, or I'm part of this bigger picture. Um, and that's all through social interaction, is that we create that meaning, right? So someone has to socially interact with you and tell you the work that you're doing matters and that they noticed, right? So
right.
I think of facility stuff. Like, I came to work today, things were looking great, everything like well maintained, all these things, and then I passed the person who maintains a lot of that. I could have given them feedback. Oh, it's the first day of classes. Like, things are looking really sharp around here, right? That would give their day, I would think, some meaning. It would for me.
Oh, for sure. Those go a long ways. I think too, a lot of the people in these careers have never been in positions where they were given constructive, positive feedback. And so when you do that, I feel like it goes a long ways. Um, I mean, I got it. One of my staff bought me a cup of coffee with a really nice note saying, I've never had anybody stand up for me before.
Mhm.
When you think about that, like that hurts. That hurts my soul to think that none of their previous employers have ever stood up for them or
Mhm.
given them encouragement. Um, that's kind of heavy on my heart, when you start thinking about how people are impacted by. Thankfully, in my career, I've had a lot of that type of positive feedback and encouragement to grow. And um, so it's a whole different paradigm that I think some people come to work with than what I come to work with the experiences that I've had in my life.
Yeah.
You told a story about a medic getting feedback one time, like she read the email and share that because I think that was powerful.
Sure. So some of these models for giving feedback, there's a ratio that's recommended. We're talking about positive and negative. The ratio is like, for every negative kind of experience the relationship's got to endure, w- we hopefully have preloaded with 3 positive interactions. And so I think, some employers are getting this message, and so they're trying to start sending out, like, kudos or thank you. I know you. I see you doing this work. And so I was talking with a woman who's a paramedic, and paramedics work very independently. Their supervisor's usually not right there with them for the majority of their shift. And so um, a lot of their feedback comes through reviewing charts, like kind of written record of the call. And she got an email from the supervisor that said, I read this call. It looks like it went really well, like, job well done. And she told me, she said, I just kept scrolling the email, trying to figure out where was the, like, hidden message here. And I think that's because she had been on the receiving end of those critique sandwiches, right? For so many
Right.
times, where it's like, We really only tell you you're doing a good job when we need to give you other negative info. But good job on that employer of doing that. And if they could do that more regularly, then it's just kind of uh, gets more baked into the culture.
Right. Well, I think we hear it all the time, like give your spouse, 5 compliments for everything that you want to say negatively or whatever. And
Sure.
so I think in our day-to-day lives, we're more conditioned to that.
Hmm.
We want to have good relationship with friends and with spouses and everything, but at work, sometimes it feels like it just has to be more, I don't know,
Well, I think
formal.
you're goal driven, and so you're trying to get to complete a task, and so you're just kind of looking at it from that frame of what conversations do I need to have to get this done or fix things, right? Putting out fires, so to speak. So it does take a lot of intentionality to also like open up your frame to appreciate. And I mean, that's gratitude, right? So the person giving that feedback also gets to experience the feeling of gratitude, which is definitely with science linked to happiness. We know this.
Yes. So, okay, so help us, let's talk about some of the different types of feedbacks because I need some specifics like to help me understand and be intentional about what I need to do. So, what are some of the different, I guess, interactions we can have or opportunities to provide feedback?
So really straightforward feedback is when someone is doing a skill or a task that is like what I call psychomotor, meaning there's steps or tools that you're using or a technique that they need to get feedback on. And the best way to give feedback on that is just to have a coach by their side. So an expert or somebody who's really good at it, provide some instruction, maybe a little demonstration, and then they're there to coach them through it as they're doing it themselves. And as you're learning new skills like that, we teach a lot of things like this in EMS, right? How to start an IV or do different skills. It's important to give very prompt feedback. So you wouldn't want to just at the end, after they've completed this task, tell them what they did wrong throughout that process. You want to stop them, give them very prompt feedback, have them do it well, and so they develop this muscle memory.
So, in our world, I could see that happening like with a custodian. Let's say we have a new custodian or we're teaching a new method of cleaning a restroom. Like we have very specific tools that are engineered for their safety
Hmm.
and also to do a very good job at cleaning the toilet. Let's just break
Right.
it down to that. But we have a brush that is long enough, you don't have to bend over.
Mm,
It's very stiff, so it does a very good job of cleaning. Um, so we've taught the skill, then they're doing the skill, and it would be a matter of okay, I think you could stand up straighter with this
right.
tool because it's long, because we want to save your back. So it would be
Right.
standing right next to them,
Yep.
coaching and directing as we see things as it happens.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I'm realizing like a lot of your stuff is about safety, right? Personal safety, and so it's really, really important. And so anything safety issues, we always talk about that it needs to be very prompt, you know, quick feedback. But remember, as they're doing the skill, they're doing a lot of things correctly. And so you can also give them feedback about that. So when a new learner is learning how to start an IV, for example, you'll often hear me saying, "Yep, mm-hmm," like that, right? So they get like this kind of reassuring, "Yep, yep, yep," on the right track. And so when it comes time for me to tell them, "Nope, wait, stop," it's not abrupt because they've kind of been hearing this like running monologue from me.
Right.
Um, versus like quiet, quiet, quiet. Wait, that's kind of abrupt. So that I know that's really kind of nuanced or like minutia that we're into, but I think having that person with them giving prompt feedback is probably the key takeaway for feedback of kind of skill type techniques. Yeah.
Right, of task or skill-based learning.
Mm-hmm.
Because we do quite a bit of that. In fact, I mean, we're doing more with some new programs we've initiated here because we're implementing some new cleaning processes
Mm-hmm.
and it's based on keeping them safe, but also having the school be cleaner because we know that that directly impacts the ability of our students to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So indoor air quality and all these measures that can be taken from a clean building. Um, so we've been doing a lot of that, and I see my supervisor doing exactly what you said. Yeah, yeah, that's good. Good job. And then, oh, you didn't, let's make sure we clean under like the bottom side of the toilet partition because
Mm-hmm.
stuff's under there.
Mm-hmm.
So as they go through, I hear her saying those kind of things and giving that ongoing feedback. And I think that it is a nuanced point, but it's important is it's not abrupt.
Right.
Yeah, I think
And
that's really
only pointing out the negatives. And something that I think anytime you're giving feedback, if you're wanting to build this culture where everyone is collectively trying to create this open exchange of ideas where no one's feeling chastised, it's just like the norm to it's the norm for everybody to be giving each other feedback in the interest of just excellence. One of the best things you can do if you are the person doing the training is ask for feedback from them. So asking for feedback up the hierarchy. So
yeah.
after you're done coaching them and teaching them, ask them, is this working well for you? Am I teaching you in a way that's, receptive for you? Or am I hovering too much? Or just ask for feedback. And then it starts becoming more of like a cultural, you're developing that culture where feedback is normal.
Yeah, that's a great point because I'll get a little bit off the subject, but you need to understand this. So, the way that we clean our schools, for the most part, is what's called zone cleaning, where one custodian has, let's say, a wing of the building, and then they clean every classroom, every restroom in that zone by themselves. And we're moving to a model that's called team cleaning, where we have a team of 4 people and they each have specific jobs. So there's a restroom specialist, light duty specialist, vacuum specialist, and they move through the entire school as a team, following each other. And part of that is developing a culture that it's okay to say, hey, the classroom looked great, but you forgot to empty the trash.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very difficult to build that level of trust among the team members because they're so used to working all by themselves, and any feedback they got
Yep.
was negative from the boss,
Right.
to where now we're working as a team, and if I give you feedback, I want you to say great catch, and we've modeled this.
Right.
Like, it's not a dig at you, it's a catch for the team to help the team perform at a higher level. And that has taken a lot of work, and we're still working on it. But it really comes back to that feedback and developing the trust bank and
Mm-hmm.
developing the skills, interpersonal skills that it takes to be able to say it in the right way and to reinforce that it's positive.
Yeah.
And this is peer to peer.
Peer to peer, that's right. And one of the things, just something else to think about is how to bake it into the culture. I talked about it going up the hierarchy. So if you're ever meeting with them where you're visible and they're all there as well, or a supervisor is there with a team, if that supervisor can ask for feedback, or really honestly, feedback just comes, right? People have complaints, concerns, requests. And so when those come, just receiving it well and letting other people see you receive it well is it just that to me is incredibly important.
Right. Yeah. And we've done some of that for sure, and it's gone really, really well.
Hmm.
Um, but it's been an interesting thing that I didn't expect to have happen. That for it to be difficult for that peer-to-peer um, interaction at that
Right.
level has been much harder than I thought it would be.
Hmm.
So, so what's another situation that we should kind of be on the lookout for to provide feedback?
So there is feedback you can give about someone's thought process, and so you can watch them do something, whatever that might be, something that involves decision making. So it's a little bit higher kind of cognitive level than just a psychomotor skill. It's like they saw a scenario and they thought through all the possibilities of how to solve that problem, and they picked a direction and tried that, or maybe turned a little when they encountered something else. So it's giving feedback on someone's decision making. And this one requires a longer dialogue. So if I'm just giving somebody feedback on cleaning something, I can visibly see and it's pretty straightforward. But when someone does something like, they elect to, I struggle to come up with an example in your sphere, but with in healthcare, we talk a lot about, how did you decide to give this medication, or how did you decide this is what was wrong with the patient? And the temptation is, maybe I've watched them do this whole case. I saw what meds they picked. The temptation is to think, I saw them perform, so I know what they were thinking. But there's really a added step where it has to be just a full-on dialogue that's based in curiosity, not judgment. And so you have to just start with, I noticed you did this. For example, if they gave the wrong medication, I noticed you gave this. When you decided to give that, what was going on for you? What were you noticing during the call at that time? Um, and again, I have trouble kind of coming up with a scenario that I might come up with for you guys, but it's basically picking through someone's thought process before giving feedback. That's the takeaway, is like we see the action and we want to give feedback on that, but we don't know the intentions behind their action. So maybe they had a really great thought process and rationale for why they, decided to do what they did. And
Right.
that's the part you want to give feedback on. Because if I just say, don't do this, that is limited to just that one scenario. Whereas if I can back up and understand their full thinking and give feedback on their thought process, then they can apply that to multiple scenarios.
Yeah, I probably got a couple of examples. I'm thinking like a bus driver or a bus aide, a behavior problem on the bus. Um, Maybe they didn't do what was probably what I thought they should do in that situation, or what we would, let's say, by the rules should have done.
Right,
Um, and we might have video of the whole situation, but there's still things that you can't understand from watching the video. And
right.
so it's that kind of thing. Like, tell me about what you were thinking when that kid stood up. I mean,
Yeah,
or, why did you make that kid go back and sit down when we probably should have just kicked him off the bus?
right.
Those kind of things.
So can
Or
I
even,
pause right there? Because this is like
yeah,
you just gave me something tangible. So um, if somebody, you said the question was, why did you make the kids sit back down when really we should have kicked them off the bus?
right.
If you had maybe observed that scenario on video, the question that probably will yield the most dialogue and opportunity for like really useful feedback would be when when the student did this, what were you noticing, or what what all was going through your mind during that time, like how and it just opens it up. So rather than saying why, people, for some reason, we get set back when somebody uses the word why did you do this, because it sounds accusatory, I guess. I don't know
Right.
why, like explain yourself, versus I'm really curious, I noticed you did this, what was happening for you during that time, right? It's a little different.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot different. I mean, it could be like, I was scared.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, or they were laughing. I didn't think there was a problem. I mean, instead of why, I think you're right. It's how we use that language that's really
Mm-hmm.
difficult. 'Cause it's easy to ask why. Why'd you do that?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
Or I think, we ask our custodians to make some decisions in classrooms. Like, they walk in and um, the classroom's just a mess at the end of the day. Well, we don't
Mm-hmm.
have time to pick up scads of trash on the floor. So we asked them to make some decisions about, maybe the floor doesn't get vacuumed and it's left that way, which is a
Mm-hmm.
hard decision for a custodian to make because they want the school to look great, but there's a bigger picture. And so sometimes they'll stop and they'll spend 20 minutes picking up the room, and then the whole team's delayed or they
Mm-hmm.
don't get the rest of their work done. And so we have to have those conversations. But I think addressing it as, tell me what you were thinking when you walked into the room,
Right.
you know, we can get at the heart of it a little bit more quickly.
Hmm.
Yeah,
It's approaching it with just curiosity because you really do want to know like their thought process because that's what you're giving them feedback on. Is there, because if you can start building their thought process to be like really good thinkers, um, then the other stuff just kind of works itself out.
exactly. Well, how does that all fit in when you're really having to have tough conversations with people? Um, so they don't come away totally crushed, even if it's a something that is a serious, serious matter.
Mm.
Um, I don't know exactly what I'm trying to ask, but those crucial conversations that have to happen. Um, is it all about what you put in the tank before that, or is it even how you have that conversation?
Oh, yes, a lot of it is the tank, and then a lot of it is when you say the phrase crucial conversation, it makes me think of a book titled Crucial Conversations. And one of the things that the author says in that book is that when we give someone feedback, particularly like if you're saying it's like a high stakes or something kind of big, that feedback, they begin having two conversations in their mind, one about the actual feedback, procedural something or another, but the other question they're having about within their head that they're having to navigate is, does the person that's giving me this feedback like me or not like me? And then also, is this feedback a little bit threatening to my identity? And that's a subconscious one. I don't think people are saying this threatens my identity, right? But if I go to work every day and I take a lot of pride in the fact that, I'm a facilities person, I take my stuff looks good, and you give
Right,
me feedback that's different than that kind of identity, that can be identity threatening, and that's why it's so these are the emotions that are at stake. And I think a lot of it's subconscious. We're not consciously feeling threatened as individuals, but um the author talks about that being either relationship threatening or identity threatening. So identity
okay,
is the story we tell ourselves about who we are and what we want for our future. And so if you give me feedback that's a little bit in conflict with kind of how I see myself, um, now we're having to this is when the emotions come up, right?
right,
And
yeah,
so I think first building that tank, um, you can also acknowledge verbally that this is like not the norm, right? So that it's like maintaining their identity as they're normally everything's on par. um, and I think getting them talking first is really key. So instead of um, why'd you do that? You can say, I noticed it looked like from my perspective this happened. What's what's going on for you? Or is that your experience? Right. And just start comparing perspectives
right.
and get them talking because I think people, especially adults, like we usually know if we've messed up, right?
Yeah,
Or if
yeah,
we either messed up like it had a bad outcome or we know our process wasn't good. So there's kind of two ways to mess up: good process, bad outcome, or bad process, bad outcome, right?
right,
So most feedback is should be directed at the process, right? Like how are you doing through this kind of through these steps?
right,
Um, so I really believe most adults kind of know when their process was incomplete or skip some steps, right? Or having a bad day kind of stuff. I think people know.
right. I think too, for me, the experience I've had is those really tough conversations, like with people that I would consider like friends at work. I'll agonize over that conversation that ends up going much easier
Hmm.
because I have the relationship. Even though it's a tough conversation, it's much more like a friend talking to a friend, and we can get things out on the table easily because we trust each other and we can deal with it. Then there's the other kind where I don't really know the person, but
Hmm.
because of my role, I have to do it. I tend to not agonize over that.
Hmm.
Um, I'm like, I don't spend nights worrying about it as I'm going to sleep.
Yep.
and it's just much more fact based. This is what you need to do. And I think
Hmm.
maybe on some of those where I don't know the person as well, I still need to back up and maybe spend a little bit more time in conversation with them at the beginning.
I think
You
so. I
know,
think of like our students when they first come into the program. For the first couple of weeks, I'm even if I see things, like maybe inappropriate kind of cultural things, like where they're not following kind of our social norms here in the department with like clothing or who knows what, right? Cussing or something. I just leave them alone. First couple of weeks, I smile at them a lot. I tell them I'm glad they picked this career. I like try to give them lots and lots of positivity up front because I know it's coming. The other stuff. And it's not disingenuous. All the things I'm saying are genuine. I'm just holding back that feedback until it's well timed or better timed, I guess, so they can
right,
really hear me.
right,
It's interesting you're saying the people that you have the closer relationship with, those are the ones you agonize over because that's what that book says. Like these conversations, we fear that they can be relationship threatening.
right, right. Sounds like I need to read that book.
I liked it. It's not just for the workplace, it's personal life too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard a couple other people talk about that book here at work, so I probably need to grab it. And
Mhm.
I've watched some people that are more skilled at me than me who have taken classes based on that book, and it definitely makes a difference on how the conversation flows.
Mhm.
I'll grab it. I'm reading 10 pages a day this year. So,
Hey, congrats.
yeah, at least. Sometimes I read 12, but it has made me, and now I'm starting to look, well, I want to read that book. I think I'll be able to get that in this year. So, and
Mhm.
I know you're a huge reader. I want to be a reader, and so I'm trying to make notes on books I want to read and hold
Yeah,
myself accountable to read a little bit every day.
do it.
So,
And if you're not enjoying it, put it away. That's kind of one of my tips. Is like I think sometimes people think they're not readers because they read a really not so good book and they just like agonize through it slowly. I am quick to put away a bad book. That's for sure.
really,
Yeah,
okay.
if it's not helpful or I'm not enjoying it, I just move on. There's so many books.
That's good to know because I always feel like, well, gosh, paid $20. I'm going to read this. Maybe it'll get better. But yeah, there's reaching the point where you're just like, why am I wasting my time on this? Other than I feel like I need to read the whole thing.
Mhm.
Well, what else about feedback do you think would be important for us to share today?
I think maybe just to highlight some of the key stuff. So, being specific in your feedback is important. So, it's very clear you're not talking about them as a whole person. You're just talking about like this one discrete little behavior or action. We talked about the importance, I can't overstate the importance of asking for feedback up the hierarchy or from your peers. So if you know you're going to have to give your peers feedback, just ask for it in advance, right? Like just go into work asking, how am I doing with this specific thing? Or is there anything I can do differently when we're doing this, right? That probably is the most important thing to build a culture of healthy feedback, I think.
Yeah.
Ask
I
for
think
it.
for me, like I have four supervisors that are, report to me, and I think we're pretty good about giving each other feedback because I think
Mhm.
there's a level of trust there. Um, I think it just gets harder from that point on because they have a lot more employees. It's hard to have that level of relationship with everybody. So I think though some of these things we've talked about though would be good to share with them of like, you know, like give verbal feedback even if you're just watching somebody do something.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's good. Good job, or uh-huh, yeah.
Yeah. And have them, those people you're talking about, ask for upward feedback publicly or in
Yes.
little small groups or something, or even one on one. That to me is unlocks a lot. You'd be surprised. So I have students give me feedback on, how I ran a certain class or how things are going in the classroom. And I have to remind myself, ooh, I need to receive this well or like really hear them or, not get defensive because then soon I'm going to be giving them feedback. But kind
Right.
of but it's tied to my identity. I'm a classroom teacher. I want it to be good. I believe I'm good. I want it to be good tomorrow. And so when they give me feedback that's in conflict with that, my first kind of feeling is like, that doesn't feel good. Um,
So you remind yourself it's not they're not attacking your identity, even though it
yeah,
feels like, yeah, yeah. Well, I think this has been fantastic. I've taken a lot away from it and I can't wait to go try some things.
cool. Well, thanks for having me on. This was really fun. I appreciate
Well,
it.
I really appreciate you taking the time to like jump over to a whole nother world. And like I say, I love what you do and just how you get people talking on your podcasts. And so I'll keep listening.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
So I have three questions I ask everybody at the end.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So the first one is, what would your parents or your family, what would they say you do for a living? How would they tell their friends what you do for a living?
They would say she's a paramedic in Austin, in Texas, and teaches other people how to be paramedics at the community college.
That's what you do, I guess.
Yeah.
That's a good way to describe it. Um, are you a digital planner or paper planner person?
Calendar? Are we talking calendar or planning?
I think planning.
Paper. Pen and
Yeah.
paper.
Yellow pad or just kind of a
It's
notebook.
it's a little spiral bound notebook, just lists and um Parker Jotter pen. Yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice. And the final question is, when do you get your best work done?
I actually know this. So you're gonna laugh because it's a time frame. It's from 10 to noon every day. So I figured out when my peak kind of focus was because I edit podcasts and so I could or I do interviews like this. And so I figured out really quickly at the end of the day like I can't get a lot done. Too early in the morning can't get a lot done. So I figured out there's this little golden time, 10 to noon. If you ping me during that time, you're going to get like a lot from me during that time.
Nice. Well, hey, we're in that time frame right there.
Yeah.
So
This is the
we're
best I
putting,
got then.
there you go. There you go. Well, I think the work you're doing is incredible. I know from having a son what it means to have a great teacher in that field of paramedicine and EMS, and so keep on it.
I will.
I'm fascinated by everything you're involved with and all the learning you keep doing and the teaching you're doing. So much appreciated from all of us public members who rely on the ambulance to show up when you dial 911. So
You
thank you
got
for
it.
that.
Yeah, and I hope you don't mind me taking a second to, I know you're mostly in schools, right? I think is kind of who your
Right.
audience is. But obviously, the um, during the pandemic, all of the teams that came through and decontaminated rooms and kept things clean, they were absolutely an essential and kind of, I imagine a lot of people in that industry feel kind of invisible, right? They're just kind of part of the fabric or maybe the furniture, they're just kind of there and we trust that they're there. Um, but I have thought at length, and so have a lot of paramedics and nurses and doctors about the importance of their diligent and like careful work during the
Yeah.
pandemic.
Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
think a lot of them did definitely felt valued for the first,
Hmm.
like really for the first time ever and noticed. I think with facilities across the board, we're kind of this group of people like behind the curtain, like pulling all the strings and no one, unless your air conditioner doesn't work, like that's the feedback we get. Like it's hot in here, but they don't know about the 1,000 times that we tweaked something that kept you comfortable.
Yep.
So the pandemic really elevated all of our custodial stuff and our HVAC guys.
Hmm. Hmm.
All of that really came to the forefront during that time period, and um, I think everybody really felt valued. So thank you for the compliment and
Yeah,
the
of course.
notes. Well, thanks so much for spending the time with us. If anybody has any other questions, is kind of the best way to grab you LinkedIn or some other way.
Yeah, you can just email me, ginger@medicmindset.com, and I'll email you back. I read everything.
Sounds good.
All
Well,
right.
if anybody else out there has kids or relatives that are in the EMS world, Ginger's podcast is a great listen, and it will give you lots of things to ask your family member about when you talk to them. So, thanks for that, and just really appreciate you being with us.
My pleasure.
Have a good week.
All right. You too.